إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today we will be beginning our fourth dars in this important series of Ilm Miras. But before we begin our fourth dars, inshallah, we will go over a couple of points that we discussed in the previous dars last week. Last week, we went over a lot of very important details and key points. And we started out that we went over the mujid of Ilm Miras. In other words, the originator of Ilm Miras, who invented the concept of Miras. After mentioning that, we went over three essential components of Ilm Miras, and they were the deceased, the heirs, and the estate. Following that, we mentioned the benefit of Ilm Miras, learning the Ilm Miras. How does it benefit a mu'min? How does it benefit us? Following that, we also mentioned three important conditions. And they were, number one, certainty of death of the deceased, that we have yaqeen that the mayyit has indeed passed away. Number two was the presence of heir. It was a shart, it's a condition that the waris, the heir, must be alive at the time of demise of the deceased. And the third condition was that there should be absence of all impediments. And we mentioned two impediments in details, and we skipped two. One was slavery that we skipped, and one was ikhtilaf darain. So, and the two other impediments that we went over were in detail. One was kufr, disbelief, and the other one was qatl. And in details, we went over four rights pertaining pertaining to the deceased pertaining to the deceased. And they were, number one, tajheez and tadfeen, funerary expenses. The second right was that debts owed by the deceased. And the third was wasiyah, any bequest or will that he had left behind. And we also went over some details and guidelines on how to prepare a will. And the fourth right was that inheritance, whatever is left after honoring the first three, and then how that will be distributed. And then lastly, we also went over the impediments and the apostasy. If somebody leaves Islam and he becomes murtad, what is the hukum for that? So this was kind of a recap of last dars, that all the things that we covered and mentioned last week. Inshallah, now we will begin our dars for today. In today's dars, we will begin the main discussions of Ilm Miras. So I will recommend you to take notes, inshallah, because there will be a lot of information and it will be hard to remember all of them. So it's good to take notes and memorize them, inshallah. It will help us and it will be easier for us to remember. So last week we mentioned that we will be going over the types of heirs, how they're divided by category, and how the share is determined. And then we also said that we will go over the share of, or the case of, husband and wife. So the estate which remains after funeral expenses. So this is a key point to remember. The estate which remains after funeral expenses Number two, payments of debts and fulfillment of bequest. Whatever remains will be distributed amongst the heirs strictly in accordance to the laws of Sharia stipulated in the Qur'an and Sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and ijma', meaning scholarly consensus of the ummah. So after that, once that is done, so in principle, the categories, there are 10 categories of rightful heirs. However, only 3 are practiced nowadays. The other 7, you can say it does not apply anymore or it doesn't exist anymore. So because of its irrelevancy, we are not mentioning that, as it would prolong our discussion. So the 3 categories of heirs that are currently practiced are, number 1, primary heirs. And that is from here is where the main discussion will begin. Inshallah, the details will all follow along as we go further. So the first category of heirs are primary heirs. They are known as Ashaabul Furudh. They are known as Ashaabul Furudh. The second category is, or the secondary or residuary heirs. They are known as Asaba. They are known as Asaba, and the types of Asaba and all of its details, inshallah, will be mentioned later when we cover the second type of heirs, or the second category of heirs. Today, inshallah, we're starting only the primary heirs, so the first category. And from there, who they are and what are their share, inshallah, all of that will be mentioned as we go along. So the details and the types of Asaba will be mentioned once again later on when we get to the second category. The third category of heirs are tertiary heirs, or known as Dhawil Arham. And once again, the details and all its types will be mentioned later on, who they are. So for now, we will just focus mainly on the primary heirs, just to make things simple and easy for us to remember. So I'll leave that on the screen for a little bit. So if you want to take down any notes. So the primary heirs, they're known as Ashabul Furudh. And the secondary types of heirs are known as Asaba. And the third category are known as Dhawil Arham. So now, inshallah, we will go over details of these categories a little bit to understand it better. So the primary heirs are those family members whose shares are fixed and stipulated by the Sharia. Primary heirs will receive their allotted shares firstly. So once again, to understand the whole concept, when somebody passes away, the first thing that will happen is we will go from whatever estate that he leaves behind and making sure all the conditions are fulfilled. So we will first honor those rights that were mentioned in the last dars, and that were, number 1, the funerary expenses. Any expenses that are there, we'll make sure we honor those and we cover those from the estate. Number 2 was, we'll see if the mayyit or the deceased has any debts that he owes to people, and we will go ahead and pay those. Number 3 was, then we will see further that if he has any bequest, any will that he left behind, if he did so, then we'll go ahead and honor that as well. But one key point to remember was that all these 3 things must not surpass 1/3 of the entire estate. If it does surpasses 1/3 of the entire estate, then the consent of all heirs is necessary. If it goes beyond 1/3, then it's necessary. And the 4th was inheritance. After that, whatever remains, so that 2/3 that remains, let's say if everything goes, accordingly, and all the 3 options that we have to honor, let's say they all fall within the 1/3, and that remaining 2/3 that remains, that will be distributed amongst the heirs. And from there, the first people to receive are these guys, the primary heirs. So they will receive their share firstly. The asaba, or the secondary heirs, do not have fixed shares, meaning they don't have a fixed share in the Qur'an. Rather, they receive whatever remains from the estate of the deceased when after primary heirs receive their allotted shares. They are also called residuary heirs. So the first one, when we get to that 2/3, distribution of the estate, so the first option will be primary heirs. Once they're all done, or once all the boxes are checked from them, all of them have received it, whoever exists from the list that is to follow on the next slide. So whoever are there, whenever they receive their allotted share, after that we will go to the second category and search in there if there are any heir alive in asaba. So category number 2 is asaba. The third category are regarded as non-heirs. So there's, according to some scholars, they're regarded as non-heirs since they stand little or no chance of inheriting. And this is because they would inherit in a case where all members belonging to category 1, meaning all of the primary heirs, and category number 2, meaning all of the asaba, once they have gotten their share, so they will only have the right to inherit when the category 1 and 2 cease to exist, with the exception of the spouse, of course, because they are considered from asaba sababiyya. Okay, so now that's why the ulama have mentioned them as non-heirs, because they come so far. And that's why we said that even in these 3 categories, most of the cases that come in Darul Ifta and all of the cases of different families, they always end up finishing the estate within the first category, or within the second category. Very rarely that it stretches to the third category. So inshallah, now we will go over the details of the first category, which is primary heirs, or Ashaabul Furudh, who they are and what are their shares. So this group comprises of 12 individuals. It would be ideal if we have this memorized. It will make things very easy, inshallah, as we progress. So this group comprises of 12 individuals, 4 males and 8 females. These are the people, once again, whom the Shariat has stipulated a share for them, who have a share mentioned in the Qur'an for them. 4 males and 8 females. So the males are, number 1, husband, number 2, father, number 3, paternal grandfather, what in Urdu we call dada, and number 4, maternal half brother. In Urdu, we call it ma sharik bai. In simple words, ma sharik bai. So these are the 4 males, and the 8 females are, number 1, wife, number 2, mother, number 3, grandmother. Now this includes both paternal and maternal grandmothers, so dadi and nani. And number 4, daughters. Number 5, granddaughter. Now, once again, the term in English granddaughter refers to both types. So here specifically, son's daughter. And number 6, full sister, where like ukht shaqiqi, so full sister, where the father and the mother, they're the same. And number 7, maternal half sister. And number 8, paternal half sister. Once again, I'll leave this on the screen a little bit if you're still writing notes or trying to memorize it, or you can take a picture of it just so you'll remember. So primary heirs, Ashaabul Furudh, once again, there are 12, 4 males and 8 females. A student, when we go through this course, an alim course, we have to memorize all of this. So if we cannot memorize, at least if we take notes, it will help us later on when we have a little advanced cases to solve for families. It will help us, inshallah, to understand the case better, or even our own family members, that if we are trying to solve our own case by the end of it, inshallah, that will help us. So we'll remember who gets the share first, and which heir is in which category. So shares for primary heirs are all stipulated in the Quran. These shares are as follows. So remember, we mentioned this briefly in our dars number 2 as well. And these shares that are mentioned in the Quran are 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, and 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6. These are the shares that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. So we just have to understand which share is allotted at which given situation. But most importantly, the shares for primary heirs will be from the above mentioned fractions. So how to determine a share? Now, how do you make a masala, or other words, how to find a base number? There are many ways to term this. So the term that is famously used is how to make a masala. How do you make the case? So we've divided those shares that were mentioned, or the fractions that were mentioned on the previous slide, into two groups. So group 1 consists of 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8. So nisf, rubu', and thumun, these are just terms for it in Arabic if somebody wants to write them or know them. So nisf, rubu', and thumun. And group number 2 consists of thuluthan, 2/3, 1/3 thuluth, and 1/6 sudus. So those previous on the previous slide, the shares that are mentioned in the Quran are right here. So now they're divided into group 1 and group 2. Once again, group 1 are the above ones: 1/2, 1/4, 1/8. Group 2, 2/3, 1/3, and 1 sudus. Why 1/6? Why did we do that? Because in order for us to understand. Now, this is a very basic and a very nice method that is taught to find out how to make the case altogether. So now see this. If the 1/2 from group 1 mixes with one or all from group 2, then the masla will be made from 6 shares. So meaning, let's say we have a husband. If in case there's no children, he will get nisf, he will get 1/2 of the estate of the wife. And now let's say there's somebody else with it from the group 2, that is 2/3 came, or 1/3 came, or 1/6 came, then the masla will be made from 6. Or any other case where 1/2 from group 1 clashes with one or all from group 2, then the masla will be made from 6 shares. So this is just a general concept to understand. Now, if the 1/4, remember up top next to 1/2, if 1/4 from group 1 mixes with one or all from group 2, then the masla, or the case I should say, will be made from 12 shares. Inshallah, when we go over the examples and solve some cases as we go further, this will help us memorize, would help us understand, how this is divided and why we're mentioning shares and not percentage. Because once we get the share, then based on that, we will get to the percentage, of each heir as well. So for now, we will remember this: if 1/4 from group 1 clashes with one or all from group 2, then the case will be made from 12 shares. And the last one, 1/8 from group 1. If it mixes with all or one from group 2, then the masla will be made from 24. So from 24 share we'll divide. And then based on that, we will take out percentage, once the case is in front of us. So inshallah, as I said, there's nothing to worry right now if it's too much for us to handle right now. As we go further, inshallah, we will slowly understand this better. As long as we have these memorized or taken down in notes, and it's you know, it's there in our minds that who are primary heirs and what are their shares and how they're divided, then things become very, very easy later on, inshallah. If all are asabat, remember, if they are not from primary heirs, remember, they're from secondary or residuary heirs, then the masla will be made from number of heirs, known as adad ru'us, not by the above method. Now, this happens when they are not from, primary heirs. I just mentioned this here just so, we might come across some cases where it is not from primary heirs and the masla is being made from, let's say, 2 people or 4 people or 3 people. So if that is the case, then we'll remember that it is just being simplified, and it's made from adad ru'us instead of the above method. So finding the base number. Now this is also a important, I should say, method that is taught, that in order to calculate and solve any inheritance problem, one must be able to determine the base number. So the base number reflects how many portions the estate of the deceased will be divided into. In order to determine the base number, it is important to know the 4 relations that exist between any 2 numbers. The 4 relations are tamathul, tadakhul, tawafuq, and tabayun. I know these are probably the first time you heard these terms, but it was important, so we will go over it, and it's very self-explanatory, inshallah. This should help you understand it better. So tamathul, this relation exists when 2 numbers or 2 denominators are identical to each other. As you can see in the example, 1/6 and 1/6. So just know this now, and the rules for it will follow. Tadakhul, this relation exists when one number is multiple of the other. So 1/6, as you can see in the example, and 1/3. And tawafuq, this relation exists when the relation between 2 numbers is neither tamathul nor tadakhul. However, they share a common factor, which is termed as wafq. As you can see in the example, 1/6 and 1/4. So what the wafq is and what the masla will be, it's coming up in its explanation right below it, inshallah. So tabayun, the 4th relation is tabayun, when 2 numbers are so different and variant in that none of the 3 aforementioned relations exist, then its relations is tabayun. For example, 1/8 and 1/3. So now, in case of tamathul, look at the first box on the chart above. In the case of tamathul, 1/6 and 1/6, the base number will be any numbers. You can choose either one of them. And in case of tadakhul, 1/4 and 1/8, the base number will be the larger number. In the chart above is 1/6 and 1/8, but here's 1/4 and 1/8. So the base number will be the larger number. And the 3rd column, it's in case of tawafuq. The wafq is known as common factor, will be divided by one of the numbers, then multiply by the other, and its result will be the base number. As you can see in the example, 1/4 and 1/6. So the wafq, the common factor, is 2, hence the base number will be 12. Hopefully this makes sense, and inshallah it's very self-explanatory as well. It's very easy for us. Is very basic understanding of math, but subhanallah, like in books and back home, that's how it is taught, to understand these 4 terms. And in case of tabayun, as you can see in example, 1/2 and 1/3. up top in the column was 1/8 and 1/3. So here 1/2 and 1/3. The base number is achieved by multiplying both numbers. So in this case, it will be 6. So 1/2 and 1/3. So you'll multiply 2 by 3 and you will get 6. So these are the 4 relations that exist, and in order to find out the base number. And this was also an important key point as well. So now understanding primary heirs. Once again, inshallah, in this, you will understand what we have done is we've taken those 12 primary heirs once again, and we've put them in categories. We've divided them into categories. So there are 6 main categories of primary heirs. This way, you will memorize and you'll remember this easily if you were to take this method, that 4 males and 8 females are mentioned right here. But if you want to take a picture of it, you can take that as well. So category number 1 is what we will mention today. Spouse. Under there will be husband and wife. Inshallah, in the next dars, we will try to cover parents and father and mother, the case for father and mother, and inshallah we will try to cover grandparents as well if the time allowed us, inshallah. And then following that will be category 3 and 4, and then inshallah the last one for siblings. So this is basically the whole picture of primary heirs right here into categories, which will help you understand the primary heir altogether on one diagram. So the first, now again from here, category 1, so we're going over the husband. From category 1, spouse, we're going over the husband. So first male heir of primary heirs, which is, we just mentioned, husband. So that category 1 is right here. We'll go going over the husband. The wife, inshallah, the case for wife will follow after that. So husband, Zawj, has 2 cases. Either he will receive 1/2 or 1/4. So in total, he only has 2 cases, 1/2 and 1/4, that are mentioned for him in the Qur'an. So he will receive, the husband will receive 1/2 in the absence of son, daughter, grandson, and granddaughter, son's daughter. So if they don't exist, then the husband will receive 1/2. And in the presence of any one of the above, then the husband will receive 1/4. If you'd like to read this over to yourself, you can do that as well before I go on to the next point. So, the husband has 2 cases, and this is something we should have this, memorized and understood very well, very well. If there are children, then he gets 1/4. If there are no children or no grandchildren, no son, no daughter altogether, then the husband will get 1/2, 50% of whatever the wife leaves behind. If there are children, then he will get only 25% of what the wife leaves behind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, وَلَكُمْ نِصْفُ مَا تَرَكَ أَزْوَاجُكُمْ إِن لَّمْ يَكُن لَّهُنَّ وَلَدٌ. That your husband shall inherit half of what your wives leave if they do not have children, meaning sons, daughters, or sons of their sons, even if these children are from the other husbands. So if there are no children, then the husbands will receive 1/2, as we mentioned. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِن كَانَ لَهُنَّ وَلَدٌ فَلَكُمُ الرُّبْعُ مِمَّا تَرَكْنَا. This is addressing the woman again. However, if they, meaning your wives, have children, then you shall inherit 1/4 of what they leave after the bequest they made and after settling their debts. So if there are children in khulasa, they will get 1/4. If no children, the husbands will get 1/2. That's if we just remember these 2, inshallah, it will just make it easy for us. So I just put the dalil there just so we can understand better, how the shares were granted and why they were granted. Now, these are very important. Rule number 1, the husband is never deprived nor does he deprive any heir. The reason why we'll have these rules, because sometimes what happen is, because of because of the existence of a certain heir, another heir at times may be disqualified, from his share. So, these rules are important to remember. So the husband is never deprived, nor does he deprive any heir. When a husband is there, he just gets his share. Now, from that category, we'll go over the second person, which was the first female heir of primary heirs. And under spouse, under husband, we went over. Now it is the hal, or the case of zawja, wife. The wife also has two cases. She will get 1/4 and 1/8. So 1/4, she will get 1/4 in the absence of son, daughter, grandson, and granddaughter. And the wife will get 1/8 in the presence of any one of the above. So it is opposite. The only difference is the husband was getting 50%, and he was getting 1/4, 25. Now here the wife is starting at 1/4, and she's moving down to 1/8 if there are children. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَهُنَّ الرُّبْعُ مِمَّا تَرَكْتُمْ إِن لَّمْ يَكُن لَّكُمْ وَلَدٌ. That they, your wives, shall inherit 1/4 of what you husbands leave if you have no children. So they will receive 1/4. So when the husband dies, and once we go over all of the details as we mentioned, then when it comes to distribution, if there are no children, the wife will get 1/4. If there are children, then the wife will get 1/8. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَكُمْ وَلَدٌ فَلَهُنَّ الثُّمُنُ مِمَّا تَرَكْتُمْ. However, if you have children, then they shall inherit 1/8 of what you leave after the bequest you make and after settling your debts. Remember, those three rights pertaining to the deceased will be honored. Funerary expenses, debts, and settling debts, and honoring and fulfilling the bequest if there are any. So after that, if there is a wife that's left, she will get 1/4. If there is no children. If there are children, then she will get 1/8. Now, this is another masala here. If the husband leaves behind more than one wife, they will all equally share in the allotted portion. So whatever the portion is, if let's say a person, he leaves behind 2 or 3 or 4 wives, and he has no children from either one of the wives, then they will receive 1/4, and all of them will share that 1/4 equally. If there are children, then they will receive 1/8, and they will all share that 1/8 amongst themselves, how many wives that the man had. Now, rule number 2, the wife is never deprived, nor does she deprive any heir. Also an important rule, because meaning she's not disqualified by the existence of other heirs, nor does she disqualify another. Inshallah, now we will go over some important masail that are related, to the cases of husband and wife. So the first masala that we will go over is that the wife will still inherit 1/8 even though she didn't bear him children, as in the case where the husband has legitimate children from previous marriages. Let's say the wife had already passed away, and he had children from her, and he marries the second wife, and she did not bear him any children, and the husband passes away. Now here, she can't say that I don't have any children, so I should receive 1/4. In fact, she will be receiving 1/8 because the husband has children from previous marriages. Remember, the rights are always, pertaining to the deceased. So now here, this wife, the second wife of this husband, will still receive 1/8. The second masala is inheritance between husband and wife occurs with the mere existence of legal marital contract according to the Sharia, which we call nikah, as long as the nikah is made. This is regardless of whether or not the marriage was consummated. It doesn't matter if the rukhsati, what we call in Urdu, was made or not. It doesn't matter. If the nikah, if a valid nikah exists, then she is considered one half. Now, there are other masail as to khalwat sahiha and all of this, how much mahar comes in, but that's irrelevant. So we're not going into the details of nikah, but inshallah we will stick to our topic here. Now, another masala is if the wife was divorced, she will only be eligible to inherit if at the time of the demise, her waiting period had not yet elapsed, in the condition that the divorce was revocable. So there are two types of talaq, I should mention. The first type of talaq is talaq raj'i, where the talaq was given to a wife with a clear statement, where the husband tells his wife that talaqtuki, I have given you divorce, or something, clear mentioning of talaq. And the second type of talaq is talaq ba'in, where the talaq is given to the wife with, vague statements, vague sentences, where it could mean, this. So as a result, talaq raj'i, the nikah is not broken. And if the irrevocable talaq is given, which is known as talaq ba'in, then the nikah does break. So if, however, the divorce was irrevocable, meaning talaq ba'in, she would not inherit even though her iddah has not yet elapsed. The main reason for that is because when the talaq is given, when irrevocable talaq is given, then the nikah breaks off. And when there is no nikah here, then what happens? There is no inheritance here given. If during that time or that phase the husband passes away, technically there was no nikah attached to the wife at that time. With talaq raj'i, let's say he gave first talaq or second talaq and she goes into her waiting period, her iddah, so the hukum, the ruling of nikah is still attached by the husband, onto the wife. So the hukum is still there, meaning that nikah is still valid upon her. So that's why if her iddah has not finished and then the husband passes away in between, if it was talaq raj'i, meaning revocable talaq, and her iddah not finished, she will receive the inheritance share. If it was talaq ba'in, she will not. I know this is a little complicated, but talaq raj'i, talaq ba'in, these are types of talaq. That's why it's very important to understand these types of talaq. And a lot of times what happens is that the spouse, they are divorced and they have given talaq to each other, and yet they don't realize and they are living together. Sometimes, in arguments and fightings, the husband utters such words that results in irrevocable talaq or talaq ba'in, and he does not realize, and then they're living together without a nikah. So these are very serious concern. When I was a student, I saw a case where the husband had actually given divorce to his wife according to all the details about 17 years ago. And the husband realized that he had this guilt in him, so he went and asked the masla in Darul Ifta, and they gave him that ruling that, hey, your divorce had taken place. And he was sitting there crying. He was an old man and he had children from her, even though the talaq had happened. So a lot of times we fail to recognize the reality, and we fail to accept the reality. But remember, this is a very important and a delicate matter. If that happens, we should set our egos apart, set it aside, and we should go and reach out to the scholars and find out. First of all, we should avoid any kinds of arguments and anything, because at that time, shaitan is, very actively trying, to trip us into saying, to trick us into saying, words that we will regret for the rest of our life. So this is very important. I thought I should mention as well. Next masla that we will go over is that if a woman was divorced with remember, revocable talaq raj'i, thereafter her husband died during her iddah, then her iddah would now change to the iddah of a woman whose husband has died. For example, i.e., 4 lunar months and 10 days, as we know that, the iddah of the wafat is 130 days. Now, another point is, if, however, the woman was pregnant at the time of demise of her husband, then her iddah would be completed at the moment she delivers the child. So it converts. So from talaq raj'i, within that iddah, if her husband passes away, it converts to 130 days. If she was pregnant, then it converts to the delivery of the child. So if this was the 4th month of her pregnancy, then it would stretch on to the 9 months complete, and then it would be basically till the time she delivers the child. So this is an important masala. Some of us have already have knowledge of these masail. Maybe some of us don't, so that's why I thought it was important to mention these as well. Another important masala is that besides her stipulated share, the wife is not entitled. Remember, it's not entitled to any financial support or maintenance from the estate of the deceased during and after her iddah period. That happens a lot. That in some cases where the wife will receive her allotted share of 1/4 or 1/8 respectively, then they are demanding other expenses and financial support as well, or maintenance, or nafaqah, or any other thing, from the estate. Now remember, she gets only her allotted share. The remaining estate belongs to other warisin, the other heirs as well. So they cannot transact in others. The wife is not permitted to transact in other heirs' property. It's their share and it's their haqq. So she's not entitled to any extra financial support. Another very important masala is that if a marriage took place between a Muslim woman and a non-Muslim man, such a marriage has no basis in the Sharia and it is considered illegitimate. So thus, inheritance between the man and the woman would not take place. Now, another masala is if a man marries a Christian or a Jewish woman, the marriage will be valid, but remember, such marriages should be avoided and discouraged, especially in today's society. However, if one of the spouses dies, the other would not inherit from the deceased partner because of their difference in religion. And in the impediments in the last dars, we went over that ikhtilafud deenayn. And there's a difference in religion, they will not inherit. Another important masala is that the Christian or Jewish wife would not be able to inherit under any circumstances upon the death of the husband. However, it is permissible for him to leave a bequest for her. So it would be permissible that he leaves a bequest, and that bequest will be honored from the 1/3 of the estate after honoring the funerary expenses and settling any debts if there are any. And whatever leaves of that 1/3, he's more than welcome to leave a bequest, for her if that is his situation. But beyond that, the 2/3 remaining, or a specific share of inheritance, it is not permissible. Another masala is that if a non-Muslim couple gets married, let's say, they were not Muslim, they were married, and thereafter both of them accepted Islam, then there is no need to renew a marriage contract. Furthermore, the paternity, the lineage of the children born from that marriage contracted before Islam would be recognized by the Sharia. Remember, paternity is a very serious matter, and it has its own ahkamat and chapters and chapters full of its details. So these children, their lineage will be recognized by the Sharia. So another important aspect of this discussion is that Nikah-Fasid, invalid nikah. How is a nikah invalid or considered void? Number one, if marriage takes place without witnesses, that's Nikah-Fasid. Number two is marriage to the sister of one's wife after divorcing his wife while she, the ex-wife, is still in her iddah, in her waiting period. Remember, this doesn't happen a lot in Desi communities, and but it is possible. And if that is the case, then that would be Nikah-Fasid if that takes place. In Desi communities, if something like this happens and the husband leaves the wife and he divorces, then the whole family breaks off ties with that husband's family and altogether. So it's very far-fetched in Desis, but it can exist and it can happen. So the third point is that marriage to a woman after having divorced one of his four wives while she, the ex-wife, is still in her iddah. If that happens, let's say a man has four wives, he divorces one of his wife and he goes on to marry a new wife while the ex-wife is still in her iddah, in her waiting period, then that nikah is considered fasid. The reason why I brought nikah fasid was because of some of the masail. So another important masala here is that in a nikah fasid, there will be no inheritance between the couple as they are not regarded as husband and wife, because the nikah itself is void. It is invalid. It's not a valid nikah. Another masala is that if a non-Muslim husband embraces Islam while his wife remains a kafir, the marriage will be terminated unless his wife is a Christian or Jew. The termination of the marriage will occur if the woman refuses to accept Islam. If, however, she accepts Islam before the iddah, the three menstrual cycles elapse from the time of the Islam of her husband, then the marriage will continue. It will remain valid. So these were some important masail related to the cases of husband and wife and to the nikah itself, the beautiful bond that they share in between them. So these were, some important masail. And inshallah, this is just to understand, to give you a little understanding how the masalas are written. So rule number one, if only one hissa is present, if only one share is present, then the makhraj will be the bottom number, the denominator of that hissa. As you can see here, example 1, A, you'll see here this big line, and in the beginning towards the right, you will see mim ya ta. This means mayyit. So that's how the masalas are written down. And, we are not restricted to write it in this way, but this is how at least, the students of in Alim course and in Darul Iftaz, that's how they write it. So the mayyit, and then you draw a big line, and then towards the left under example 1A, you see Zayd. So Zayd is basically the deceased, okay? And he leaves behind no children. He leaves behind Zawja. He leaves behind a wife, only one wife. So she's receiving rubu'. She's receiving 1/4. Remember, if there were children, she would have received 1/8. So no children, she's receiving 1/4. No, so we already know that the masala will be from 4. So as you can see above, it says masala, and then you see number 4 there. So the masala will be total share will be from the 4. So now if the wife takes 1/4 and she takes 1 share, underneath 1/4 is written 1 share for her. And then on this left side, towards the left side, you see am, which is not from amongst the primary heirs, and it is from amongst residuary heirs or the secondary heirs. That's why you see mentioned there asaba. When it becomes asaba, and then you will see in the parentheses, he will take leftover, and he receives 3/4. As you can see below that, there's 3 written there. And when he receives that, so 3 plus 1 equals 4, and that's how it will be calculated. So based on that, 25% will go to the zawja, to the wife, and 75% will go to the uncle, if that was the case. That's a very rare case, but if that is the case, then of course, because there are, other primary heirs that can exist, and then the masala would be different. This was just so you can understand. Now, in example 1B, you'll see that Fatima is the deceased, is the mayyit. She leaves behind a husband. She leaves behind a husband, and we already went over the case for the husband. If there are no children, the husband will receive 1/2. If there are children or grandchildren, then the husband will receive 1/4. But as you can see, that Zawj is receiving nisf, 1/2. So, and next to him is once again uncle, and he is part of the secondary or residuary heir, and he's given leftover as well. So here the masala will be made from 2, and husband gets half, and since there is nobody else, the uncle is receiving the other half or the leftover. So half of one is like 50% is given, so the remaining 50% is granted to the uncle. Therefore, the masala is made from 2, and they both get 50% each. Now, in this, you'll see that once again, Fatima is the mayyit. Okay. Actually, I have, well, here it should have been Fatima plus her husband plus her son, but inshallah we will cover that as well. For some reason, this is copied on twice, so sorry for the confusion, but inshallah I'll cover that. If there is the wife is the deceased and there's this husband left and one son, how would that play out and how would that be different? So inshallah, we will cover that in our next dars. And inshallah, next week we will go over the cases for father and mother and more masail, pertaining to their ahwal. And inshallah, if you have any questions, please email us at questionsfordarulquranfoundation@gmail.com. هذا وبالله التوفيق. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.